You find that you struggle with getting over a scarcity mindset. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how you can overcome that. And the reason it's important to learn to do so is because in my previous video, I talk about how the concept of scarcity and having a scarcity mindset can be related to experiencing spiritual abuse, right? Spiritually abusive people use the concept of scarcity as a way of inducing fear and controlling their victims. And so, if you haven't watched that video already, please go back and watch that video. Okay, so basically, a scarcity mindset is believing that there is not enough, and basically, good things are going to come to an end. Whatever you have now is not going to last. I talk about that in my previous video and help you understand where that scarcity mindset might have come from. So, if you're struggling with that and you're trying to overcome that, the first step is figuring out why you have that scarcity mindset, what triggered it for you, what started it. You don't have to do a deep dive into your childhood or anything like that. Everybody struggles with the concept of scarcity in some way, right? When you live in the world for long enough, you see that, good things don't always last and things happen and we don't know why they happen. And so it is easy to operate from a place of scarcity. And I talk about factors that can lead to that. If you have dealt with abuse in your past, whether it's spiritual abuse or other types of abuse, then it's very easy to succumb to scarcity thinking or scarcity type thinking because you've lived it, right? If have been in an abusive relationship, you know firsthand that the good things that are there don't last. When you are being abused by somebody who has more power than you, who is stronger than you, and who is in control, they're the ones that dictate a lot of whether you experience good things in life or not. So I totally get it. And the first step I get in overcoming this is understanding where that came from, right? If you're not sure where it came from, think about the last time you thought that way, the last time you really struggled with it. What are some circumstances? It could not only be abuse, it could be economic hardships or just being in situations where things were precarious for you and you didn't have the steady access to resources that you needed to be healthy. So I want you to think about that. And that's the first step. Take some time to journal about it, take some time to think about it. And then the second thing you want to do is that once you've identified what you believe could be at the root of that scarcity type thinking, you want to start to challenge that a little bit, right? Part of what sometimes you'll hear people say that if you struggle with scarcity, then you want to think about abundance. And I think that's a good place to start, but it's not necessarily complete, right? And so um you can think about things in such a way where instead of saying that this thing that you value is limited, that you tell yourself, hey, that it's not a limited thing and it's an abundant thing, right? And you can do that. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with reframing that, but I also want you to think about what's on the other end of scarcity for you. So for some people, the reason why the scarcity mindset is so hard to get rid of is because you have this belief that you won't be able to survive if you don't have that thing, right? And so people who, for instance, when I talked about this issue with scarcity mindset and spiritual abusive people will say things like, well, if you leave this environment, nobody will treat you as well as we will, right? There's no other place out there that treats people as well as we do. So this is it. This is the best it's going to be, right? And so using the example or using the framework, one way to combat that is be like, well, no, maybe there isn't. There are probably plenty of churches and places out there that treat people as good or better. But that can be a really scary step for you to take, right? Especially since you don't know. A lot of times, a lot of our struggles come from how we view uncertainty. And the fact is, you don't know what's out there, right? Maybe there is an amazing place that treats people better, but it's not within your reach, right? And so another way to combat that is to tell yourself, even if I don't have access to a place that's as good as where I am right now, I'll be okay. I think about this interview that I saw with Melody Hobson. She's married to George Lucas, and she talked about a time in her life where she was in a job, and I don't think she liked it. She said she didn't like the job very much, but she was afraid to look for something else, and she was afraid to like take some risks that she needed to take in the job to advance. And so she told herself, you know what, I got this job, I can get another job. And if I don't get another job, I will figure things out. And I think that's a great way of embodying what the opposite of a scarcity mindset is, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. If you leave that abusive person or you leave that abusive environment, you don't know what is going to be on the other side. And so reminding yourself about times where you have overcome hardships and you've survived and you've thrived in the midst of uncertainty and hardship is a great way to remind yourself that there is more out there than you think. I tell my clients this all the time, and the clients that I work with professionally as a psychologist, that when we are anxious and when we are thinking from an anxious perspective, it is very closed, it's very restricting, right? Even things like tunnel vision happen when you are in this anxious fight or flight state, and that's done as their body does that to help you survive. However, when we're in that space cognitively, it can make it difficult for us to think about other solutions to problems. Instead of becoming flexible, we become rigid. Instead of thinking broadly about how to solve a problem, we get stuck thinking that there's only one way or no way to solve that problem. And so understanding that you can think about times where you have overcome hardships, and that will help you start to get more flexible. Okay. So I want you to remember that anytime you're stuck in that scarcity mindset, number one, identify where you think it came from, or think about the last time you felt that way. So that way you get an idea of what's fueling it. And then number two, yeah, you want to think about the abundance of things, right? And so you want to remind yourself that, look, this thing that you think you're so afraid to lose, there's more of it out there. But sometimes that can be hard to take that step, right? It can be hard to believe that there is more and there is better out there for us. And so you want to then think about how you've overcome hardships in the past, and you want to address that fear that even if you don't, if you don't get that thing, if you leave this abusive partner and you're alone the rest of your life, you will survive, right? If you leave this a spiritually abusive environment, you never find another place like it again, you don't find that the group of people or the supports that you had, you're going to be okay. And the way you know you're going to be okay is think about times where you have overcome adversity in your past. Okay. So these are really important tools that I want you to start focusing on in your recovery journey, because abusive people and people who are not healthy for us to be in a relationship with really prey upon that concept of scarcity to maintain their bond and their attachment to you, and to keep you in a place of dependence and in a place of fear. And the way you overcome that is by training yourself to look that fear head on and teach yourself, hey, I'm going to do what it takes to survive, right? And look, if this thing doesn't come, I'll be okay. I will figure it out. Now, of course, it's a lot easier said than done. And I recommend, if you feel like you need the help of a professional, like a therapist, get that help. But it's more of, as I'm talking about these things, I want you to think about the mindsets that you need to adopt to overcome these challenges. And when you think this way, it helps you to not only overcome abuse more quickly, but it helps you not get yourself into situations where abuse might be more likely to happen. Anytime we're fearful, every time we're thinking from a place of scarcity and lack, we might jump in to situations and we might act impulsively and put ourselves in a situation where we're backed up against the wall or put into a corner. And we don't want to do that. And so thinking this way and training yourself to think this way gives you options and allows allows you to make decisions mindfully and purposefully instead of reactively. Okay. So I hope that helps. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. If you have dealt with the scarcity mindset, how have you overcome that? If you're still struggling with that, what are you struggling with? What kinds of tips and advice you have for others? All right. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please take some time to like, to share, to comment, and to subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. And may you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. Bye-bye.